TV7 Israel News is made possible thanks to your generous donations. Shalom and good evening. This is TV7 Israel News broadcast to you from Jerusalem. And in today's top stories, tensions escalated in Jerusalem last night when thousands of Jewish extremists from a radical nationalistic movement on the one hand and Arab Islamist youth on the other sought to confront each other on the streets surrounding the old city walls. Israel emphasizes to the UN Security Council that it is not bound by any agreement threatening its existence. U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price acknowledges that the Biden administration intends to lift all nuclear-related sanctions, which are inconsistent with the 2015 agreement with Iran. Tensions boiled over in Jerusalem last night when thousands of Jewish extremists from a radical nationalistic movement on the one hand and Arab Islamist youth on the other sought to confront each other on the streets surrounding the old city walls. Tensions initially rose at the start of the Muslim month of Ramadan on April 13th, when evening gatherings of Arab youth outside the northern Damascus gate of the walled city prompted harassment of Jewish youth, including physical assaults of ultra-Orthodox boys, which later circulated on social media. While police sought to end the phenomenon by arresting the purported culprits of the attacks, while in tandem thwarting further nightly gatherings by the Arab youth at the flashpoints of contention, leaders of a radical Jewish group have seized the opportunity to fan the flames by calling for a protest to confront the Islamist Arab youth at the Damascus gate last night. Consequently, Israel police deployed hundreds of riot-geared officers to the area with the goal of maintaining order while allowing for freedom of worship to be maintained. Subsequently, overnight, clashes erupted on both sides, with riot police making every effort to separate between the Arab and Jewish rioters, while in tandem breaking up the protests. During the clashes, 20 officers sustained injuries and 44 rioters from both camps were arrested on charges of assault. Meanwhile, at the United Nations headquarters in New York, the world body's Security Council held a special meeting on the situation in the Middle East, during which the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, Tor Vennesland, seized the opportunity to call on all sides to take steps to de-escalate tensions and maintain calm.
Since the beginning of Ramadan, there have been repeated clashes between Palestinians and ISF and Israeli civilians in and around Jerusalem's old city, leading to injuries and arrests. I call on all sides to take steps to de-escalate tension and maintain calm.
While the UN Security Council session on the Middle East sought to solely focus on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Israeli ambassador to the United Nations Gilad Erdan, for his part, seized the global stage to divert attention to what Jerusalem perceives as the most substantial threat to peace and security in the Middle East, which the Israeli envoy further asserted must be the focus of the debate on the region.
Iran's relentless attempts to acquire military nuclear capabilities, its terrorist proxies that continue to destabilize the region, and its grave human rights violations remain the most substantial threat to peace and security in the Middle East. These must be the focus of debates on the region.
Ambassador Erdan went on to note that while declarations by world powers on their resolve to thwart Tehran's nuclear aspirations may be encouraging, it is not enough. Lessons must be learned from recent history vis-à-vis North Korea.
It is clear to everyone that the capabilities and knowledge that Iran is developing right now are irreversible, and no agreement can roll them back. The fact that world leaders state they are committed to preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons may be encouraging, but it simply isn't enough. Iran continues to pose an unacceptable threat to Israel and the countries of the region. The international community also wanted to prevent North Korea from becoming a nuclear power. The lessons from then need to be learned.
The Israeli representative to the UN further addressed the ongoing nuclear talks with Iran in Vienna, emphasizing that Israel will not see itself bound by any agreement that does not fully address the threats against its existence.
We will not see ourselves bound by any agreement that does not fully address the threats against the existence of the State of Israel. And every one of you would do the same if you were in our shoes, particularly in light of the Holocaust.
Turning to Brussels, where the European Union asserts that tensions between Israel and Iran would not hamper on efforts by the P5+1, which includes Russia, China, France, Britain, the United States plus Germany, to see the JCPOA, commonly referred to as the 2015 nuclear agreement with Iran, revived.
What we think, you asked several times about our opinion, so I will tell you in general. I mean, what we think is that there is no alternative to the ongoing process in order to solve all the aspects related to the Iranian nuclear program. This is why we are engaged in this process. The Joint Commission had a number of meetings already over the last few days and weeks. They will continue next week between the participants of the JCPOA. By the way, Israel is not participant of the JCPOA and is not participating in these current talks in Vienna. That needs to be very, very clear. And there are contacts between our coordinator, so EU coordinator, and the US delegations at this stage.
Meanwhile, in Moscow, Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova voiced Russia's satisfaction with the latest developments in Vienna. Zakharova highlighted that the goal of talks in Vienna aimed to see the nuclear deal revived based on its originally agreed parameters and timeframes, while further revealing that the United States, under the Biden administration, already acknowledged that all actions undertaken by the previous Trump administration must be corrected.
Так вот, цель ведущихся сейчас переговоров – скорейшее восстановление осуществления СВПД в соответствии с изначально согласованными параметрами и сроками. Мы отмечаем нацеленность всех вовлеченных сторон, включая Вашингтон и Тегеран, на достижение результата, восстановление баланса интересов в рамках СВПД и создание условий для устойчивой реализации всеобъемлющих договоренностей 2015 года. Американские коллеги в общем-то, даже и не оспаривают тот факт, что все допущенные прежней администрацией США грубые нарушения СВПД и резолюции, также СБ ООН 2231, должны быть, наконец, исправлены с тем, чтобы создать условия для разморозки иранских обязательств, которые были приостановлены в ответ на несоблюдение ядерной сделки со стороны Вашингтона.
Zakharova also divulged the fact that any revisions to the 2015 agreement are not being considered.
Вопрос о пересмотре всеобъемлющих договоренностей 2015 года не рассматривается. Мы воспринимаем это как свидетельство признания безальтернативности СВПД и исходим из того, что все необходимое для перезапуска СВПД на полную мощность подробно зафиксировано в нем, собственно, самом. Мы убеждены, что самый эффективный путь к достижению этих высоких целей, которые ставили и которые были поставлены перед тем, как сформулирован был и заключен всеобъемлющий план действий, лежит через неукоснительное выполнение этих обязательств всеми сторонами. Россия именно так и действует, настойчиво побуждая остальных партнеров последовать своему примеру.
Meanwhile, in Washington, U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price acknowledged that the Biden administration does indeed intend to lift all nuclear-related sanctions, which are inconsistent with the 2015 agreement. However, not all of the sanctions imposed by the previous Trump administration, including the designation of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, were classified as nuclear-related, but rather were labeled as terror sanctions.
I would make the point that there are sanctions that are inconsistent with the JCPOA. And as we have said, if Iran resumes its compliance with the nuclear deal, meaning that if Iran once again becomes subject to the most stringent verification and monitoring regime ever negotiated, we would be prepared to lift those sanctions that are inconsistent with the JCPOA. There are sanctions that are consistent with the JCPOA. There is nothing in the JCPOA that prohibits us from countering Iran's broader malign behavior. its ballistic missiles program, support for terrorism, support for proxies in the region.
The State Department spokesperson also responded to a question about the missile which penetrated Israeli airspace from Syria yesterday.
We support Israel's ability to exercise its inherent right of self-defense. We condemn any actions that threaten Israel and regional security more broadly.
It is interesting to know that pro-Iranian elements, desperate for some sort of victory versus Israel, encourage circulating conspiracy theories about the Refer 2 missile, claiming it deliberately sought to target Israel's nuclear research installation. However, similar to TV7's report of the event in last night's broadcast, the commander of the U.S. Central Command, General Kenneth McKenzie, shed light on the reported incident.
I think it reflects actually incompetence in Syrian air defense, where they were responding to Israeli strikes on targets in Syria. They fired their missiles. The missiles went ballistic, literally, and followed a parabolic trajectory into Israel, where they were intercepted. I do not believe it was an intentional attack, but just rather a lack of capability on the part of the Syrian air defenders.
Thank you for watching us. As part of TV7 Israel's prayer initiative, I would like to encourage you today to join our TV7 team and I in fervently praying for the peace of Jerusalem and the salvation of Israel, alongside, of course, our prayers for our persecuted brothers and sisters around the world. I'm Jonathan Hassan wishing you a Shabbat Shalom u'mevorach, and we will see you again on Monday at the same time.